Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the L. Ron Hubbard Theater in Hollywood, California. Tonight we present a live broadcast of the Golden Age Radio Hour featuring Yukon Madness, written by L. Ron Hubbard.
Yukon Madness first appeared in the August 1935 issue of New Mystery Adventures magazine. It was the first of several stories Ron would write about the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, a unique breed of lawmen he came to know firsthand while traveling in Canada. Ron's villains were the most vile creatures, and his heroes were people the readers could trust and root for. And this story delivers both. So get the dogs ready and line up your sled and get ready for the ride of your life. We're proud to bring you this stage presentation tonight. Please acknowledge our wonderful cast. Our director and narrator, R.F. Daly. Marcus Coloma. Taylor Meskimen. And William. Stand there. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show.
Etok the madman, stalking across the bitter wastes, squinting over the backs of his 12-wolf team, stared into the blackness toward the snarling flares of red and green and white which shot into the indigo winter sky. The aurora borealis. Etok the madman, a horror in the raw north of Hudson Bay, spreading death with sharp steel and throwing the shattered bodies of men to his slavering team. 12 wolves as black as the winter sky, glittering teeth as sharp as the white ice which jutted through the dry snow. Mouths as red-flecked as the borealis tugged at the sledge traces, and Etok laughed, a piercing, grating laughter which splintered the great silence. Tommy McKenna heard the laugh, though it was far away, and Tommy McKenna shuddered. Under his red coat and sealskin parka, he could see nothing, but he heard. The cold barrel of the Lee Enfield was hard under his tight fingers. His eyes, brown eyes as cold as Arctic ice, closed to lines. That was Etok. The sound came far through the ebon chill. That was Etok. And Billy Simmons was back at the camp alone, sleeping. Or was he sleeping still? Had Etok struck again in the Yukon territory? Tommy McKenna raised his snowshoes and struck out in a rapid lope for camp. He had forgotten the bear tracks he had seen earlier in the day. He had forgotten that he and Simmons were almost out of food. He remembered only his charge to get his man. "Get Etok!" the lieutenant had ordered at Post Ladue. It had sent McKenna and Simmons on a 500-mile trek through blackness, through acid cold, across uncharted seas of snow. And now Etok's laugh out of the ebon cold. Tommy McKenna's snowshoes rapped the dry crust in a steady tempo. His lean, weathered face, handsome before it had been too long exposed to screaming winds and silent mountains of white, was almost buried in the fur hood. It was 55 below. And a man's breath froze in his nostrils and stayed there, freezing his lungs. He came within 100 yards of the camp and stopped. He called out, "Simmons!" His voice clear as a trumpet. No answer. Heavy, throbbing silence. The flare and flash of the northern lights as they shot spitefully up at the stars. A wolf howled out in the cold, alone, dismal and quavering, answering the call. "Simmons!" Again he listened intently. Tommy McKenna threw off the safety of the Enfield. His mittens were clumsy, but he dared not take them off. His hands would freeze to the barrel of his gun.
Simmons!
Uncertain now, knowledge as icy as the half-year night told Tommy McKenna that he would never again hear Simmons' voice. With that sixth or perhaps seventh sense born in men who stand eye to eye with danger and the raw north, Tommy McKenna already understood. He advanced slowly. The fire was a red glow against the blue darkness. The flame had died down. A shadow lay against it, a shadow queerly limp and empty. Tommy McKenna stared at the patch of scarlet cloth. Bright, warm stain was growing in the dry snow, spreading out slowly and steadily. Simmons' face had been torn away, as though by claws. Nothing remained but the broken, red, shredded skull. Tufts of his parka lay black against the white. Blood was scattered far. Tommy McKenna's voice was stiff, unreal.
He turned his wolves to feast.
Anger blocked out the body, blacked out the northern lights. Tommy's hands shook with rage. He looked north, and his eyes were chill. The unwritten law of the Mounties. Swift death to those who would kill one of us. Etok would die. With either bullets or steel or bare hands. No trial for Etok now. He had committed the unforgivable crime, punishable by instant death on sight. He had killed Simmons of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. No wooden gallows in the Yukon Territory headquarters with a priest to see Etok through the death's door. Oh, it had to come when? As soon as death could. Tommy McKenna looked back at the fire. The torn fur and scattered bones of the sledge dogs told a swift story. Tommy knew that he was on foot, that he would have to live from kill to kill, unless he met Etok. The garish flame of the northern lights showed up the trail. The large pads of Etok's wolves had left their plain print upon the snow, and over the pads was the print of a sealskin-covered foot. That was Etok. Picking up a bundle of supplies from the ruin of their outfit, Tommy struck out. His snowshoes rasped over the cold, dry surface, and the weight of the Enfield rifle was hard against his arm. No time to bury Simmons now. He might lose his quarry. Slogging through the never-ending night, Tommy heard the sounds of the north. The crackle of ice under terrific stress. The moan of sharp wind across the great reaches. The shivering, hunting cry of the wolf. For hours, the trail was straight, leading into the very heart of the Borealis. Etok the madman was traveling fast and far, lengthening the road which was milestoned with blood. Tommy's breath was ice on his lips, and his lungs burned from exertion and freezing air. The Enfield rifle grew heavier. The revolver under the parka banged with steady monotony against his thigh. His squinted eyes did not leave the trail. The sound of his snowshoes was like the staccato flicking of sandpaper across a drumhead. He stopped, still looking down, his practiced glance reading the story. Someone had intercepted Etok's trail. The sledge had stopped. Then a pair of shoes led off at an angle, traveling west. It seemed to Tommy that the second prints were lighter, but he did not think that Etok would desert his team. Nor did Tommy think that any man in the north could drive the 12 wolves except Etok. He followed the sledge runners again, quickening his pace. The wind was stronger, sending whirlwinds of dry snow rocketing up toward the black sky. 2 months until morning. 100 miles to the first Mountie post. Tommy felt alone, and cold, and weary. But his eyes held the trail. The northern lights flared higher and higher until they covered the entire dome of the sky. The world stood out stark and bitter like the ocean seen through a lightning flash. Far ahead against the rim, Tommy saw a string of dots. As he quickened his pace, he thought that perhaps he would have a showdown now, even though Etalk riding his runners would be fresh. Seconds were ticked away by the rasping shoes. Another flare of lights, 100 yards in front of him. Tommy beheld the team, but the revelation was mutual. The sledge stopped. Tommy slowed up, watchful, walking like a cat. The dim shadow before him might rush him. The infield was balanced, safety off. Still, the shadow did not move. Less than 20 feet away, the wolves growled low in their throats. Tommy, moving an inch at a time, closed the gap. The shadow was immobile. A white blur showed in the parka hood.
Etalk, drop your gun.
His voice was quiet, steady, more than assured. But an instant later, the tone had changed.
My God.
The shadow crumpled abruptly, pitching headfirst into the trail. Tommy, holding his rifle in one hand, caught at the shoulder. A vibrant voice answered him, hesitant with sobs.
Don't kill me.
It was a girl. Her face was not that of an ordinary Eskimo woman. It was finer, more delicate. Nor were her eyes slanted. Her figure was slight, and although it was almost hidden under the bulk of her furs, Tommy caught an impression of a slender body, small hands, a high, firm breast. He lifted her up, a little angry now.
Where's Etalk?
Who is Etalk?
Where is the man you met down this trail?
She shook her head and averted her eyes.
I know no Etalk.
Tommy's mouth went hard.
I am McKenna of the Royal Mounted.
But I have done nothing.
Tommy experienced a sudden hunch that this girl was not an ally of the madman, that she was innocent of any complicity in his crimes. But if that were so, then why had she attempted to help Etalk out by throwing a Mountie off the trail? Or had Etalk been unaware of pursuit?
Where is your village?
Demanded Tommy.
Your igloo.
An hour's travel from here? I have done nothing. Do not arrest me.
She was regaining her pride now. Something of defiance had crept into her tone. She held her head high and looked at him.
Take me there,
Ordered Tommy. She drew back the whip. It sizzled and cracked beside the right ear of the lead wolf. He sprang up and into the traces. Others lunged forward. Riding the runners, the girl drove the team ahead. Tommy fell in beside her, trotting to keep pace with the sledge. In the fitful glare, he could see her high cheekbones and intelligent forehead. He did not need a second look to tell him that she was beautiful and dangerous. The skin igloos, banked with snow and ice to keep the warm within, were built in a depression which afforded some protection from the raking wind. Part of the icy walls had been broken away. A few people, black dots against the white, were visible. Trails of wind-shredded white smoke lifted themselves out of the huts. A chorus of voices greeted the two, and were then instantly still. Surprise showed on the faces of the men. The girl paid them no attention. She drove up before the low entrance of an igloo and called out,
Womack!
The old man ducked through the entrance and blinked at her, his flat face without expression.
Tie up these wolves. The stranger is coming.
She ordered, tossing him the whip and dropping to her knees to crawl through the opening. Tommy followed, dragging the gun by its muzzle. In the interior of the hut, it was warm. Furs covered the couches along the sides, and a cooking pot simmered cheerfully upon the fire. She explained that part of the icy walls had been taken out recently for repairs, and he noticed the quarried blocks of ice and cured skins in readiness. The girl paid Tommy no attention. She stripped off her parka and sealskin boots and laid them on a couch. She undressed, straightened her shirt, made of dearly bought cloth, and patted her soft skin shirt until it lay smoothly along her sides. Putting on a pair of lighter boots and putting another fur coat around her, she held her hands to the fire, looking sideways at Tommy.
My name is Kaja. This is my home. You are free to eat of my food.
Her half-white features lit up with a smile. Tommy nodded. He pulled off his coat, threw it down beside hers. She stared at him a moment, slightly dazzled by his scarlet coat and blazing buttons. Then her eyes fell to the holstered revolver and cartridge belt. The rawhide thong around his neck was attached to the butt of the revolver.
You called him the stranger. Why?
Tommy watched her closely, quizzically, and at the same time admiring her stunningly beautiful body.
Because he is a stranger. He came to us days ago. He is strong, a mighty hunter, a good provider.
Why did you take his sledge from him?
Because he said that a man was following him and that the man would not kill a woman.
Does that mean you intend to marry the stranger?
What? Why shouldn't I marry him? He is strong, a good provider. Since my brothers were crushed in the ice, I have no one here, and I find the men of this tribe weak.
Outside, one of Etok's sledge wolves howled in hunger. The wind moaned over the hut. Tommy shivered and stepped closer to the fire. He had not shivered from fear. He was used to this untamed country. He had not shivered because of the impending clash with Etok. No, he had shivered because he had been so long away from laughter. This girl. Something like an electric current seemed to pass between them. He steadied himself.
Then you know nothing of the stranger?
No, nothing except that he is strong, a good hunter, rich in goods. I'm tired of being alone.
She seemed to lean closer to him. Tommy clenched his hands behind his back. Abruptly, he swept her close to him. Her eyes were large, afraid, but her lips were trembling. She raised her mouth to his. He kissed her and saw that her eyes were open. Her lips were warm and sweet. Her hands under his shoulders tightened. Tommy heard the voices outside, heard the crunch of snowshoes, but he could not let her go. He felt a jerk at his side. Something hard stabbed him above his belt. The girl backed away, her eyes blazing. She had his gun. In that instant, Tommy started to snatch her wrist, but he knew that before he could move, she would shoot. A brittle voice rapped behind Tommy.
So, it is the Mountie.
Tommy turned. Etok was standing just behind him. Etok's stringy black hair came down in straight, vicious lines on either side of his face. Etok's eyes were glittering with an insane fire. Etok's great hands clutched the barrel and stock of Simmons' rifle. The girl backed away, mouth tight with sudden fear. It was obvious that she had never seen Etok that way, had never seen the killer light distort a man's face. Etok's ugly mouth did not move as he spoke.
Kaja, give me his gun.
No, Etok. No.
She pulled the fur parka closer around her body, her breasts visibly rising and falling with the emotion of the moment. Etok's voice was lower, threatening.
Give me that gun.
Coolly, she backed further away from him. Etok centered the Enfield rifle muzzle on Tommy's chest and stepped after her. His hand shot out and clutched her wrist. She struggled to get free. With a jerk, he secured the revolver. The back of his hand swept down, cracking against her cheek. She fell into a sobbing huddle on the couch. Tommy knew that he could do nothing against Etok. In the moment Etok was turned away from him, Tommy stripped off his cartridge belt and threw it toward the cooking pot. Etok whirled, laughing.
I will do away with her later. She has not yet given me what I want. And what I want, I take. First, I will do away with you.
Tommy looked at the girl. Her shirt was torn down one shoulder and through her rent. Her creamy skin shone like satin. Her cheek was streaked with the mark of Etok's blow.
Go outside.
Tommy stooped to pick up his parka, but Etok stopped him.
You won't need that, Mountie. You won't need anything in a very little while.
Tommy ducked and went out. The cold wind stabbed through his scarlet coat. 55 below. Too cold to snow. The people of the village came hesitantly out of their huts. They failed to understand the reason, but when they saw Etok's face, they understood Etok. Understood that he was a killer. They had some faint idea that this was a Mountie and that Etok was wanted by the law, but they could not understand Etok's rage. Had they been other than Eskimos, they would have thought instantly that Etok was revenging himself upon the Mountie for the taking of Etok's woman-to-be. But neither they nor Etok would consider this a crime. Behind the hut, Tommy saw Etok's wolves lying in the snow. They were watching Etok with red-shot eyes. Beside an ice pinnacle, Etok ordered Tommy to stand. Etok shifted the Enfield and pulled a bundle of rope from under his shirt.
If you were clever,
Said Etok, smiling with his ugly mouth, but not his eyes.
you would prefer the gun to what I have to offer you. I'm going to lash you there, and then I'm going to throw buckets of water against your legs until you're a block of ice from your toes to your waist.
And then?
Said Tommy, seemingly unperturbed.
And then I'm going to turn my wolves loose on you to finish you off. They haven't been fed since your red-coated friend was so obliging to them.
Tommy stiffened. Etok saw the warning in the Mountie's face. Etok slammed the rifle barrel into Tommy's chest, driving him back against the pillar of ice. Working with swift hands, Etok bound the Mountie's wrists, passing the rope across the scarlet coat and behind the column. Etok turned to the Eskimos.
I want water! Buckets of water! Quick!
They scurried before the lash of his words. Women came fearfully forth, not daring to disobey, and placed copper cooking pots at Etok's feet. The instant the wind struck them, the surface was frozen. Etok poured out a cupful at Tommy's feet, laughing. The stream froze upright like a sword blade sticking out of the snow. Tommy, half frozen from the wind, dizzy from the blow in the chest, glanced down the hill before them through the darkness toward the Borealis. No help would come now. But someday, Etok would die under the Mountie guns. At least, thought Tommy, he would be revenged. Kadja came forth from her hut, walking swiftly toward the crowd. Her face was streaked with tears, but rage burned there. Her clenched hands were empty. People fell away to let her pass through. She came up to Etok, touching his shoulder. He whirled on her.
What do you want now, Kadja?
Do not do this thing.
She was not begging. Her face was held high to his. Her gaze was level.
And why not? Is it possible that you would like to die with this man? My dogs, Kadja, are very hungry.
Politely, she disregarded the threat.
This man is a man, and you are a madman. You must go from our village. My men will not let you do this. And the police will hang you if they catch you, Etok.
Etok laughed. His glance swept around the circle of faces behind him. The hunters, they turned away their heads, ashamed. Etok's laugh reached a high pitch and then stopped. Snatching Kadja's shoulder, he jerked her close to him.
You think I would listen to a woman? You do not know who I am, Kadja. You do not know that the man who will soon be your mate is Etok, the madman.
The circle backed swiftly. Women ran to their huts. The men stood by, held by curiosity, until their wits told them to go. Etok shook Kadja like a wolf shakes a rabbit. He threw her away from him and whirled on Tommy. Snatching up the first bucket, Etok started to throw the stream against the Mountie's legs. A shot rapped through the great distance. Etok dropped the water and spun about. Another shot followed, and then the hammering of bullets racketed like machine gun fire. Etok, face gray with fear, ran in a short circle, staring into the darkness. But he could see no flashes which would place the rifles. He could see no charging men. Bewildered, he snatched up the Enfield and started in the direction where the fire was coming from. Tommy strained against the thongs.
Kadja!
She came swiftly to him. Reaching inside her shirt, she pulled forth a short skinning knife and began to cut the bonds.
I'm sorry. I did not know. I am a traitor. With your kiss still on my mouth, I delivered you to Etok the madman. Can you ever forget that?
Of course I can.
The shots had ceased. Etok strode through the cluster of huts, raging. Tommy stepped away from the pinnacle of ice, flexing his cold, stiffened arms.
Quick, he will come back, and you are unarmed. Run out across the plain and hide in the ice. I will find you, and...
No, if you can find me, so can Etok.
Etok entered the Kadja's hut. Tommy stepped behind the ice pillar, out of sight. In a moment, Etok came into view. Etok was carrying a cartridge belt which still smoldered. He had dragged it from Kadja's fire. Looking toward the pinnacle, Etok uttered a roar of anger. He could see Katja, and he ran toward her, holding the rifle up, ready to shoot. His eyes were shot with red flame like those of a wolf. Katja ran past the ice pillar and across the open stretch. Etok, bellowing, sprinted after her, his black stringy hair standing out straight behind his head. Tommy crouched in the protection of the hummock and waited. He heard Etok coming closer and tensed. In an instant, Etok would pass beside the pillar. And then, Etok's arms came into view. Then his face. Tommy leaped forward and missed! Etok backed away. He raised the Enfield. The shot was hasty. It snapped as it passed over Tommy's head. Tommy lunged in under the gun. The Enfield went across the snow, spinning and spewing smoke. Etok's hands tugged at the rifle and the knife on his belt. Tommy slammed a blow into the greasy face. The knife shimmered as it came away from Etok's belt. Etok's hand snapped down like a pile driver. It missed Tommy's face by less than an inch. He tried to seize the wrist and the knife. Etok screamed as he felt himself rocked back by another blow. Once more, he tried to bring the knife up. Tommy kicked at Etok's heels, and Etok went down, dragging the Mountie with him. Parka and scarlet coat blurred in the flurry of snow. Katja came up, seizing the Enfield rifle and standing back, waiting for a chance to shoot. She saw the blades rise and fall twice. The second time, it was red and dripping. Tommy sagged, his face in the dry white crust. Etok, roaring triumphantly, leaped up to sink the knife one final time. Tommy rolled. His hand shot out and caught Etok's throat. Etok cried out. He tried to wriggle free. He forgot about the knife. Etok was conscious of only two thumbs burrowing into his windpipe. They began to roll down the hill over and over, locked together. Katja saw the knife go up and come down again. She heard Tommy's startled gasp of surprise. Etok, fighting off Tommy's hands, dropped the knife and thrust his palms against the Mountie's chin. From the region of the huts came an expectant whine, which became louder and sharper. The keen noses of the wolves had caught the scent of blood. They were standing up in their traces, gnawing at their confining thongs. For seconds, Etok and Tommy remained quiet, exhausted, but by straining his head back, Etok was just able to keep the thumbs from sinking deep, but his breath came in hoarse rattles. Tommy, aware only of the terrific pain in his back, had enough presence to retain his hold. Then, through the darkness, he heard that swelling whine, heard the heart-freezing expectancy of it. Etok's wolves were trying to get loose, trying to get down to the fighting men, that hot, salty stench of blood. Katja came slowly down the hill, afraid for her marksmanship, not quite able to bring herself to the task of killing Etok. She too heard that whine, and she knew that it would only be a matter of seconds before the black-gray horde swept down upon the fighters. She could not hope to hit the wolves to keep them off. Down the hillside ran a frozen trail of red, ending at the two at the bottom. Katja avoided it, moving fearfully, fighting against her impulse to just run before the wolves came. Tommy moved his head from side to side. Etok's palm against his chin was slipping. Tommy pressed his thumbs deeper. He could hear the horrible rasping breath above him. He knew that thumbs were doing it. Suddenly, Etok tore loose. He rolled swiftly to one side. The knife gleamed in the starlight. He snatched at it. Tommy lunged. Once more, his hands fastened on Etok's throat. The thumbs went deeper and deeper. Etok tried to sink the blade in Tommy's chest. An untapped reservoir of strength surged through the Mountie. A savage power coursed down his arms and into his hands. His thumbs sank in and seemed to meet his fingers. He heard Etok shriek, heard the swift rush of pads across the snow, heard the snarl of wolves coming down toward them. Katja darted to Tommy. She looked up at the shadow sweeping in upon them and tried to drag Tommy's hands away from the other's throat. Working with a sob of despair welling up in her breast, she pried away at Tommy's fingers. Snatching Tommy's arm, she dragged him swiftly away. The wolves lunged in. The Enfield rapped, and a shadow crumpled. The pack swerved away from the flame. The team leader, whirled in his tracks. Suddenly he fell upon Etok. Wolves closed in and blanketed the bodies, snarling at each other. The rip of tearing cloth was loud. Men from the village ran down the hill to Katja. They knew now that Etok was dead, and their fear of Etok was far greater than their fear of the wolves. They picked up Katja and Tommy and bore them to the village. Behind them, they could hear this ripping sound, but not from cloth. Several hours later, Tommy lifted himself on one elbow, surprised to discover that his wounds did not hurt him. He was once more in the hut of Katja, lying upon a skin couch covered with furs. His scarlet coat was carefully folded across the room, and his revolver had been restored to the somewhat charred holster. Katja was sitting by the fire, silently looking at him.
Thanks.
I owed you more than that.
Tommy had tried to swing down his feet, but she held up her hand.
Please don't. Though the knife wounds are not deep, it will take them weeks to fully heal. You must lie down.
Resignedly, he sank back.
Weeks, is it? And then the spring ice breakup will come, and I won't be able to get through until summer. It'll be months.
I knew that, and I am.
He raised himself again, smiling. She shook her head and sat down by his side, stroking his cheek.
No. You wouldn't take me back with you. Nor would you live here with us. We're far apart, and yet so close.
I know, Please, don't touch me. Not like that, because it...
I know what you're thinking. That you would not want to go away and leave me here if I...
Yes.
But that needn't make any difference. You will be here months, and after that, you may go, forgetting me forever, dearest.
He reached up and dragged her down to him. She pulled herself up.
But your wounds...
Wounds? What wounds? To hell with the wounds.
His hands were behind her shoulders, pulling her down again.